She was the girl who had it all. Quadruple platinum records before she could vote. A sitcom built around her wholesome charm. A Grammy on her shelf. Whitney Houston calling her name to play Cinderella. Brandy Norwood was living the dream that millions of young women imagined for themselves. Except the dream was a performance, and the performer was falling apart. What no one saw was the secret heartbreak, the eating disorder, the lies constructed to preserve an image that felt more like a prison than a gift. And what no one could have predicted was the tragedy waiting on a December afternoon in 26. A fatal accident that would break her in ways fame never had, pushing her to the edge of wanting to disappear entirely. This is the story behind the fairy tale. Brandy Rayana Norwood was born on February 11, 1979, in Macomb, Mississippi, into a family where music was as natural as breathing. Her father, Willie Norwood, was a gospel singer. Her mother, Sonia, would eventually become her manager. From the beginning, Brandy's path seemed destined for the stage. She was 14 years old when she signed her first recording contract. Her self-titled debut album arrived in 1994 and went multi-platinum in the United States on the strength of singles that announced a new voice in R&B. By 15, Brandy was a household name. By 16, she had her own television show. Moesha premiered in 1996 and ran for 6 seasons. The sitcom was loosely based on Brandy's own persona, the relatable, wholesome teenager navigating school, family, and growing up. It made her a fixture in American living rooms, but television was only part of the story. In 1997, Whitney Houston chose Brandy to star opposite her in a television production of Cinderella. The casting was a cultural milestone, a Black Cinderella in a major primetime event, one that expanded what millions of young viewers believed a fairy tale heroine could look like. Brandy had idolized Whitney since childhood, and now her hero had personally selected her for a role that would reach families across the country. By 1999, Brandy had won a Grammy Award for her duet with Monica, "The Boy Is Mine." Dolls were manufactured in her image. She had become a role model, a symbol of what a young Black woman could achieve in an industry that did not always make room for her. But symbols carry weight, and the image that Brandy represented, the good girl, the Disney princess, the flawless teen idol, was not something she had chosen for herself. It was something constructed around her, maintained by a management team and a mother who understood that in the entertainment industry, perception was everything. Brandy would later describe feeling put in a box of perfection. She believed that any mistake she made would let down everyone who depended on her. She was a teenager with normal emotions and normal flaws, but she did not feel she had space to be normal. Every misstep felt like it could become a disaster. It looked like freedom from the outside, but it didn't feel like it from within. At 15, Brandy fell in love for the first time. The object of her affection was Wanya Morris, a member of the R&B group Boyz II Men, who was in his early 20s at the time. The relationship was real, but it could not be public. Brandy's management made the decision clear. She was too young and her image was too carefully cultivated to be seen dating anyone. The romance had to remain hidden, so for years, Brandy and Wanya carried on in secret. They even recorded a duet together, Broken-Hearted, and in interviews, Brandy denied that there was anything between them beyond friendship. But there was. She later acknowledged that what they shared blossomed into real love. For a teenage girl navigating the pressures of sudden fame, that love was one of the few things that felt genuinely her own. The secrecy, however, took its toll. Maintaining a hidden relationship while projecting a carefully managed public persona required constant performance. And when Brandy was 18, the relationship ended. Wanya left her for someone else. Brandy described herself afterward as heartbroken and crushed. She was devastated, but she could not grieve publicly because the world had never been told there was anything to grieve. The loss was entirely private. What she could do was channel that pain into her work. Her second album, Never Say Never, arrived in 1998 with production from Rodney Darkchild Jerkins. The songs reflected the emotional fallout of a first serious heartbreak and a private life she was never allowed to acknowledge publicly. The album became a blockbuster, spawning hits and cementing her status as one of the defining voices of late 90s R&B. The irony was bitter. Her greatest professional success was built on heartbreak that no one knew about. The fans who loved those songs had no idea what had inspired them. Brandy was learning a lesson that would define much of her life. Pain could be transformed into art, but the transformation did not make the pain disappear. Around the time Never Say Never was dominating the charts, Brandy was privately falling apart. She was 19 years old, at the absolute peak of her fame, and she later admitted that she was the unhappiest teenager probably in the world. The pressure to maintain her image had become unbearable. She was supposed to be perfect, not just talented, but beautiful in a very specific way. Thin, flawless, ideal. Brandy became fixated on her weight. "I wanted to be thin," she would later reveal. "That was my main thing." In pursuit of that goal, she started harming her body in ways she later recognized as an eating disorder, quietly slipping into habits that left her exhausted, fragile, and scared of herself. These were behaviors she hid from everyone around her. To the world, Brandy appeared to have everything: a hit show, platinum records, beauty, fame, money. No one looking at her would have guessed that she was suffering from an eating disorder, that she was literally making herself ill under the weight of expectations she felt powerless to escape. Brandy would eventually speak about this period with painful clarity. She described not taking care of myself, not eating at all, regurgitating, all of these things that girls do. The casual phrasing, "all of these things that girls do," pointed to something larger than her individual struggle. She was caught in a system that demanded impossible standards, and she was destroying herself trying to meet them. "People don't understand that being the hottest star or making the most money does not mean anything," she reflected years later. She had been omnipresent, wealthy, celebrated, and she had been miserable. The contrast between her public life and her private suffering would only grow sharper in the years to come. In 2001, Brandy was 22 years old and working on her third album when she entered a serious relationship with Robert Smith, a music producer who went by Big Bert. Soon, she discovered she was pregnant. For many women, this would be joyous news. For Brandy, it was terrifying. Her entire career had been built on a wholesome image. She had been raised in a deeply religious family where, as she understood it, having a child outside of marriage was considered sinful. Her team worried that an out-of-wedlock pregnancy would destroy the carefully constructed brand they had spent years building. The Disney princess could not be an unwed mother. So Brandy made a decision that she would later call the biggest mistake of her life. She and Robert fabricated a story. They claimed they had secretly married in the summer of 2001. When their daughter, Sarai, was born in June 2022, Brandy presented Robert to the world as her husband. MTV even aired a short reality series documenting the pregnancy and birth, with the happy couple playing their parts convincingly. For 2 years, the deception held. Brandy had protected her image. She had given the public what they expected from her. But in late 2023, Brandy and Robert's relationship fell apart, and when it did, there was no divorce to file, because there had never been a marriage. In 2004, Robert broke his silence in a radio interview. He revealed that he and Brandy had never actually been wed. They had only pretended, he said, because Brandy felt that having a child out of wedlock would sully her image. Brandy was blindsided. She released a statement accusing her ex of trying to destroy her reputation while using their daughter to gain publicity. But the damage was done. The revelation became tabloid fodder. Fans who had believed in the fairy tale felt betrayed. The squeaky clean image that Brandy had sacrificed so much to protect was now the very thing being used against her. Looking back, Brandy has been unsparing in her self-assessment. "The lie about being married was the fall of my career," she said. "Everything changed." She was in her mid-20s, a single mother, and the subject of public ridicule. The identity she had built, or had been built around her, was collapsing. She later admitted that during this period, she did not know who I was. The pressure to be perfect had led her to make a choice that backfired catastrophically, and she was left to pick up the pieces alone. On December 30th, 2006, Brandy was driving her Land Rover on the I-405 freeway in Los Angeles. Traffic ahead of her had slowed. Her vehicle rear-ended a Toyota Corolla, triggering a chain reaction collision involving 4 cars. The driver of the Toyota was Awatef Abudihaj, a 38-year-old wife and mother of 2 children. She was critically injured in the crash. The next day, New Year's Eve, she died from her injuries. Brandy, then 27 years old, was physically unharmed, but nothing about her life would be the same. The incident became immediate national news. The California Highway Patrol concluded that Brandy had triggered the chain reaction crash when traffic slowed and later recommended a misdemeanor vehicular manslaughter charge, and media outlets seized on the story. Headlines questioned whether the singer had caused a fatal accident. On the internet, strangers who knew nothing about the investigation flooded comment sections with accusations. Some called her a murderer. Brandy was overwhelmed. "Whether it was my fault or not, I was still involved," she would later say. "I didn't wake up that day to get involved in a fatal car crash." For nearly a year, she lived under the threat of criminal prosecution. There was talk of vehicular manslaughter charges, which could have carried jail time. Every day brought uncertainty about whether she would face a courtroom and a jury. The investigation continued through 2007. Authorities examined every detail of the crash, and in December of that year, the Los Angeles City Attorney's Office announced its decision. No criminal charges would be filed against Brandy. Investigators had concluded there was insufficient evidence to prove negligence beyond a reasonable doubt. Brandy had not been under the influence. She had not been using her phone. She had not been distracted. It appeared to be a tragic accident in slowing traffic, nothing more. Her attorney released a statement describing the extraordinary hardship Brandy had endured while living under a cloud of suspicion due to premature accusations. But the legal outcome did not end Brandy's ordeal. Awatef Abudihaj's family filed wrongful death lawsuits from her parents, her husband, and her 2 children. Another driver injured in the pileup also sued. The civil litigation dragged on for years. Ultimately, Brandy settled all the cases out of court. Reports indicated that each of the victims' 2 children received approximately $300,000, with other settlement terms remaining confidential. The final settlement was reached by November 2009. No amount of money could bring back Awatef Abudihaj, and no legal resolution could touch what was happening inside Brandy's mind. The law had found no basis to hold Brandy criminally responsible, but Brandy could not grant herself the same verdict. She knew that a woman had died in an accident involving her. She knew that 2 children had lost their mother. And no matter what the investigators concluded, she could not escape the weight of that knowledge. In the months and years following the crash, Brandy sank into severe depression. She had already endured so much: the heartbreak, the eating disorder, the public humiliation of the fake marriage scandal. Now she carried the burden of a tragedy that would have broken anyone. The public attacks made everything worse. People who did not know her, who had never met her, felt entitled to condemn her. Online, the worst labels clung to her name. She was judged by strangers who had already reached their verdict long before the official investigation concluded. Brandy tried to continue working. She released an album called Human, which she described as channeling all of my hurt and past experiences. The title itself was a statement. A reminder that behind the celebrity, there was a person. But outside the studio, she was falling apart. She later revealed just how dark things became. "There was a point when I didn't feel like it was okay to live on," she told an interviewer, "because someone else lost their life." The guilt was suffocating. Even though the law had cleared her, Brandy could not clear herself. She felt unworthy of continuing to exist when Awatef Abudihaj no longer could. The logic was irrational, but trauma does not follow logic. She was drowning in a grief that had no resolution. At her lowest moment, Brandy struggled with suicidal thoughts. She later described lying in bed, consumed by despair, genuinely uncertain whether she could survive what she was feeling. What saved Brandy was a single thought: her daughter. Sarai was still a young child when Brandy hit bottom, and in that moment of absolute darkness, Brandy found herself thinking about what her absence would mean. She remembered the conversation she had with herself. "So, you're just going to go out like this? That's whack. You have a daughter. If you can't do it for yourself, do it for her." It was not a sophisticated argument. It was not therapy or medication or any of the tools that would come later. It was simply the recognition that there was a little girl who needed her mother, and that abandoning Sarai was something Brandy could not do. "If Sarai wasn't here, I wouldn't be either," Brandy has said plainly. "The place that I was in, it just felt like I wasn't going to make it through." Motherhood became her tether to life. It was the one responsibility strong enough to override the despair. From that foundation, Brandy began the slow work of rebuilding. She sought professional help. She started therapy. She turned to meditation, journaling, and her faith. Her family, her parents and her brother Ray J, provided crucial support. They had been there through all of it, and they remained there now. The recovery was not quick. It was not linear. There were setbacks and difficult days. But gradually, Brandy began to find her way back to stability. She took on acting roles, appearing in the television series The Game, and eventually performing on Broadway in Chicago. She participated in Dancing with the Stars. Each project was a step forward, a reclamation of the career and identity that had nearly been destroyed. More importantly, she was learning to take care of herself in ways she never had before. The girl who had starved herself to meet impossible standards, who had fabricated a marriage to protect an image, who had pushed through pain because that was what stars did. That girl was slowly transforming into a woman who understood that her well-being mattered more than any public perception. Sarai grew up watching her mother fight, and in turn, she became part of Brandy's motivation to keep fighting. The relationship between them deepened into something that sustained them both. For years, Brandy kept the full truth of her struggles private. She worked, she raised her daughter, she slowly healed, but she did not speak openly about how close she had come to giving up. That changed around 2020 when Brandy decided it was time to tell her story. In a cover story for People magazine, she discussed her decades-long battle with depression for the first time in detail. She spoke plainly about how dark it got and what it took to survive it. She held nothing back. The same year, she released B7, her first album in 8 years. It was her most personal work to date. Songs like Borderline and Bye Bipolar confronted her mental health struggles directly, though she clarified that she had not been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. The titles were metaphorical, a way of processing experiences that had shaped her. There was hesitation about being so transparent. Brandy admitted she had to push past the instinct to hold back, to protect herself by staying silent. But she chose honesty instead. "I didn't want to dwell on those thoughts," she said, referring to the fear of exposure. She wanted her music to help others who might be facing similar darkness. The response confirmed that she had made the right choice. Fans who had grown up with Brandy, who had loved her music and watched her on television, now saw a different dimension of the woman they thought they knew. Her willingness to speak openly helped reduce the stigma around mental health, particularly for Black women in the public eye who often face pressure to appear invulnerable. Brandy continued therapy and spiritual practices to maintain her equilibrium. She described herself as back on track and moving in the right direction. The work of healing was ongoing, but she was no longer fighting alone. In her personal life, she watched Sarai graduate high school and begin pursuing her own music career. The pride she felt was evident in everything she said about her daughter. The relationship that had once been Brandy's lifeline had evolved into a source of joy. Her bond with her brother Ray J, despite occasional public tensions over the years, remained strong. He even tattooed her name on himself as a gesture of love. Her parents continued to be her foundation. In late 2025, Brandy gave fans a glimpse of how far she had come, and how vigilant she still needed to be. During the Chicago stop of her joint tour with Monica, she suddenly walked off stage mid-concert, alarming the audience. Later, she explained that after weeks of non-stop rehearsals, she was dehydrated and felt as though she might faint. Rather than push through as she might have done in her younger years, she listened to her body. Everyone involved agreed that prioritizing my well-being was of the utmost importance, she told fans in a statement. She thanked them for understanding. By the very next show, she was back on stage, fully recovered. The incident was small, but it illustrated something profound. Brandy had learned to put her health first. She had learned that no performance, no image, no expectation was worth destroying herself. "Nobody is perfect," she said in one interview. "That's not even something I try to be anymore. That's a prison in and of itself. I've endured so much," she reflected, "and I wouldn't change it because I love who I am today. I love being me, finally." There is a particular kind of tragedy that comes from being loved for an image rather than a person. Brandy Norwood spent her youth performing perfection for an audience that did not know, and perhaps did not want to know, about the human being behind the smile. She paid for that performance with her health, her privacy, and very nearly her life. But tragedy was not the end of her story. It was the crucible that burned away everything false and left behind something real. Brandy is not a cautionary tale about the dangers of fame, though her story contains those warnings. She is something more complicated, a woman who was broken by impossible standards and rebuilt herself on her own terms. She found her way through heartbreak, illness, public shame, and the unbearable weight of an accident that took a mother from her children. She emerged not triumphant in some Hollywood sense, but present, grounded, honest about her scars. What Brandy offers now is not the fairy tale she once represented. It is something better, proof that survival is possible, that asking for help is not weakness, that loving yourself can take decades and still be worth the journey. She still makes music, she still performs, but she does it as herself, flawed, resilient, finally free of the cage. The brightest stars, it turns out, are not the ones who never dim. They are the ones who find their way back to light.